everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cine-Files live here on the Cine-Files YouTube channel. I am the outlaw John Rocha, one of the co-hosts of the Cine-Files, joined as always by the gentleman who does the research, who co-hosts the show, made the whole thing happen, and he is the focus of attention today with his films The Assistants and Beyond the Cage of Fear. Great White, the great Steve Morris. How are you, Steve?
I'm good, and I absolutely love that little intro you did. I've never seen that before. That was really cool. It's great.
Well, you should tell my girlfriend, because I spent an hour yelling at the computer trying to get everything to be scored away and put it right, laying everything on top of itself, but it's missing one more thing, and I think I could jazz it up just a little bit more, but that's just me, and that's how I am about these things. But yeah, I felt like we never had an intro for the show, so I thought I'd create one this afternoon, and I'm glad you like it, Steve. Means a lot. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on another episode of Cine-Files Live. We've been doing these every now, kind of giving a little bit of a break to the show so we can connect with you all on a live basis more consistently, and keep providing you all the other shows that we do. But this is a way to kind of give us a little bit of break and also connect with you all. It means a lot to us. And today, as I said just a few seconds ago, we are going to be talking about Steve Morris's 2009 feature called The Assistants. It's a film that he spent a lot of time making. You've seen him mention it numerous times on the show, so we're going to talk about that. And also, Steve wanted to talk about his open the floor rather for anybody to talk about is a Great White Beyond the Cage of Fear.
Great White Shark Beyond the Cage of Fear.
Sorry, Great White Shark Beyond the Cage of Fear. And he's going to talk about that as well. We're going to have some special guests possibly showing up. You know, you never count your chickens until they hatch, so I don't want to say who they are just yet. But if they show up, trust me, it's going to be worth it. We're going to spend a little bit of time with them. And with those of you who are joining us live, the Streamlabs are open and the Super Chats are open. So please feel free to send in some support and some love to us here, and especially to Steve Morris, as he's going to be talking about his work today from 2009, The Assistants, and Great White Shark Beyond the Cage of Fear. Steve, we've also got patron questions we're going to get to as well from a number of you all who sent in questions. So it's going to be a fun time hanging out with all of us. Probably about 90 minutes, maybe a little bit more, depending on how things go in the discussion. But Steve, what do you want to say to start off a show like this?
The first thing I want to say is thank you, John. I know this is like, we're going way outside what we normally do on the Cine-Files. we even are breaking one of the basic rules, which is one of our basic rules was, unlike other shows, we're not going to have people on to talk about their own work. We want people on to talk about work that they love. And this is none of those things. This is clearly being all about me, which is something I'm not entirely comfortable with, but I really, really am grateful that you're giving me the opportunity to talk about this movie that I'm really proud of. So thank you very much.
And we're going to talk about it. We're definitely going to get into some stuff. There might be some questions about, like, why'd you make this decision? Why'd you make that decision? But we're also going to get into the history of the movie and what the overall result of it was for you, how it changed your life. We're also going to include, and for those of you who don't know, the movie is free on YouTube there for people. It's already had 37,000 views over the last few years. So it's a film that people have watched in large numbers. So if you're interested in it, you haven't seen it, after we're done with our show today, maybe it'll give you more motivation to go watch it for sure. But without further ado, let's get into it, Steve. Make sure I don't have okay, let's get into it, Steve. So this is The Assistants, 2009. So many people involved here. As you see above our heads, you were able to land Joe Mantegna, Jane Seymour, and Stacy Keach in this, but also a young group of actors led by Chris Connor as Jack Ryder, Michael Grant Terry as Carl, Kathleen Early as Sarah, who has been on the show in years past, and so has Michael Grant Terry. That's right. Yep. He's been on the show as well. Aaron Himmelstein as Ben, Tate Hanyok as Alex, Peter Douglas as Bill. I think that's the whole kind of main young cast.
Yeah, that's the gang.
And
plus,
then
go ahead.
No. And then plus, Ryko Aylesworth is there as Cassie, Jonathan Bennett as Zach, right, and Joe Hernandez-Kalski as Jamie Nash, and our own friend Josh Haber doing a small part there with Stacy Keach as one of the fellow trash men, or garbage men, as you might say. Also, we might be having on the show, or we've got on the show, the cinematographer Aaron Torres is going to come on a little bit later to talk about how he approached lighting and shooting this with you, working in conjunction with you. You wrote, produced, directed this film, and I remember being at one of the readings for this early on in the process. So talk to me about this project, because this film is a really interesting film about assistants banding together to kind of trick these people they work for into greenlighting a film and getting themselves employed on the film, because they came out to be filmmakers and they had lost that kind of impetus, and they were lost in these assistant jobs, these helper jobs, and they weren't doing what they really wanted to do, which was to make films. And the basic crux of this film is about them getting together, led by Jack Ryder, their producer friend, to be able to put this all together, and some really tough moments at the end of the film. So tell me, what was the genesis of this script? Because clearly you've written a number of scripts. What motivated you to dive into this one?
Well, one thing that's interesting is, for the most part, people say write what you know.
Yeah.
And I never did that. I wrote things that were all about things that were not me, for the most part. And this was the most writing about my life and people that I know of anything I had ever done. And it came from a whole bunch of different places. The first was right out of college. I had a job as the personal assistant to Joe Chaikin, who is a famous theater director, worked with Sam Shepard, founder of the Open Theater. And he had a stroke and was aphasic. So it meant that he couldn't speak very well.
Oh, wow.
And I was this 21, 22-year-old kid, and I suddenly had access to his social security number, all his medical records. I had his address book. At one point, he wanted to direct a production of Waiting for Godot, and Samuel Beckett was still alive, and they were friends. So he wrote a handwritten note that said, "Dear Sam, want to do Godot, love Joe." And Beckett wrote back to me, and I got this letter from Samuel Beckett in his own handwriting saying, "Dear Joe, anything you want, love Sam."
Nice.
And it was just like such a weird, here I'm this total nobody who suddenly, that was when I first went, man, if I wanted to, I could really mess with these people, because everything was going through me. Everything that they knew about, but that Joe knew about what was going on, was because that's what I told him was what was going on. So that was sort of the very beginning of the idea. And then, of course, knowing my own personal stories, going through the development process and having meetings with executives and having scripts out there. My other friends, I heard just horror stories after horror stories of this process, because, spoiler alert, Hollywood is an insane place.
Yes,
it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I had other friends who were personal assistants. And then the biggest thing is that, in a lot of ways, these characters, they're all me, with the possible exception of Bill, and the arguments they're having, and the frustrations and the depressions and the self-doubt and all of that. That's me.
Wait. Are you saying all the characters represent a side of your personality, or who you are as a person? Oh, wow.
I mean, they're characters. Okay. They're fictional.
Well,
I am not them exactly. But Carl arguing with Sarah, and Carl being the cynical one who says, who has a very dark view of how the world works, and Sarah being the idealist, and maybe Sarah's idealism is a cover for her fear, and maybe Carl's cynicism is a cover for him not wanting to put himself out there. That's me. You know what I mean? Like those are aspects. That's a debate I have in my head. The Jack feeling like, the geeky editor who loves film knowledge. I'm not Alex. I'm a different person from that, but that's also aspects of my personality. Jack, the person who is making the project happen and feels responsible for the people and his friends that he's bringing along and not failing. That's me. Okay. Does that mean I'm Jack? No. Does that mean I'm Carl or Sarah or Alex? No. But emotionally, a lot of what I was going through is that, because I was a person who was who thought I was going to be successful and was coming up against Hollywood and was growing older and realizing I maybe wasn't who I thought I was, and my dreams weren't going to come true, and that I had to reassess that and myself. And so a lot of that comes from my own struggles,
Yeah, I was wondering, I rewatched it again this morning for our show, and I thought to myself, like, this is now, having done the show with you for 5 years, but also having been your friend for much longer, this is your point of view. This is very much your voice, in a number of ways, right? The knowledge of film that people, you have these characters randomly dropping Godard or Truffaut or whatever throughout the script, which of course shows the film knowledge there, but you can also sense this little kind of, and I want to say this as correctly as possible, like a little bitterness throughout this film about these people that they are assistants for, about Hollywood itself, about the process. And this is 15 years after a film like Swimming with Sharks. So there had been there had been a number of films that were criticizing the business and the industry. What were you aware of that? And did that motivate you to try to write a script that was uniquely different from both of these films that were done, to highlight some of the toxicity that exists in the film industry even today? We're not that far removed from Weinstein finally being put on the bench. So, yeah, what did you think? And who was it? The gentleman from a few months ago, the big theater producer. Yeah.
Scott Rudin. Yeah.
Scott Rudin, who was finally benched for a little bit. Yeah.
So first of all, that is a great question. And you're 100% on the money. So one thing is, of course, I was aware of those movies, and the experience I had, and I don't know if you had this experience, but when I first saw The Player, and Swimming with Sharks came out right when I had moved to LA to go to film school, I thought they were ridiculous, over the top, satires. And then slowly coming here, I was like, oh no, these are like documentaries. Like it is exactly that terrible, if not much, much more terrible. So that was the first experience. The other experience, by the way, I should have said before, is that another piece of what The Assistants is I have a best friend of one of my closest friends became really, really famous all of a sudden. And he had put all of his, everything's going to be okay when I'm famous. If I could just be famous, everything's going to be okay. And he got famous, and it wasn't okay. And he was, if anything, more depressed and sad because he had achieved the thing that was supposed to fix him, and it didn't fix him. And then what happened was, he kind of lost all of his friends, because all of his other friends were struggling actors and artists and stuff like that. And they couldn't relate to his problems, and they couldn't, and he couldn't really relate to them, because they're still going, I really want to succeed and be famous. And he's going, it's not that great. And so suddenly that knowledge, that became a big part of what The Assistants is like, what is the nature of the dream that you're going after? What is its cost? And then what happens when you get there, and maybe going, it's not so nice. And then the other thing, just because you mentioned Harvey Weinstein. I would not write the movie the way that I wrote it today, post Me Too, post Harvey Weinstein, because Gary Green, it's just different. And I did it for the reasons that I did it when I wrote the script, over a decade ago. But looking at it now, I go, ooh, it's not. All the implications are really different today.
Yeah, I did feel that way about the film too. It felt, and again, I say these from a place of love and friendship, but it did feel a little bit of its time. Like that's a snapshot of Hollywood at that time, around the mid to late 2000s. And how people felt about the business, how people felt about the industry. I'd heard those stories as well. It's one of the reasons I never became an assistant myself. I would temp as an assistant every once in a while for Charles Seegers over at Scripps, and I had access to all those contacts of his every once in a while. Rolled calls with him. I got the idea of what it might be like, and you do to have a sample, or you do get a window into what it's going to take for you to get to the next level. And you've got to really want it, because assistants are a dime a dozen, and you've got to really want it in a way that stands out. So watching what you were talking about in the movie here, I was struck with, wow, this is a time capsule of that time. Now we've kind of become more open. Yes, post Me Too, post Black Lives Matter as well. I imagine this cast will be much more diverse than it is in 2009 when you made the film. And so the exploration of those issues would be so different in a post Me Too, post Black Lives Matter world, and a post Weinstein, post Rude world as well, to see what you can do with it. But I thought Joe Mantegna did a fantastic job as
he's great.
Gary Green. I think because he doesn't imbue him with a stereotypical plasticity that is one level. There's more going on in interactions, and he's actually trying to drop some wisdom to Jack about the business as it is now when you're making that film. And I felt like that was a really interesting level or character choice to make for Joe Mantegna. How did you go about getting Joe, getting Jane Seymour, getting Stacy Keach?
So Karen had worked as in the casting department on Joan of Arcadia, and she had come to know Joe there. And as we said a million times, he's literally like the nicest person in the world. And she maintained that contact, and he was one of the first person we thought of. And so we got the script to Joe because of Karen's connection, and Joe liked the script, and that, and he likes working on projects that were different, doing small things where he gets to play kind of different things. He was lovely too. I think one of the keys that happened, the key scene with Joe is obviously the one after the night with Sarah.
Yes.
And I remember he and I went, and one of the best things is to be able to sit down with your actors and really talk before you go shoot the movie. So we went to Taste of Chicago, which was the restaurant he owned in Burbank, and we were hanging out and talking before we shot it. And he kind of said, so he's kind of being a jerk in this scene, and he's just kind of this womanizer. And the thing that I was explaining that I think he got so well, which is that it's the character's like a heroin addict, and the heroin is really bad, and he knows it's bad, and it's making him in the long run really, really unhappy.
Right.
But in the short term, it makes him really happy. And so now he's explaining to this other person, well, this is where you buy the drugs from, and this is how it works, and this is how you shoot up. And it's both a this is a good thing and an exposing his pain,
right.
Right. And that complexity of the character, like, because part of it is that Gary Green is the bad future of Jack. This is where it could go wrong. And Gary Green started in the movie business because he loved this movie Valentine Boy, and he wanted to make great films like those great films of the 70s, and he didn't do that. Right. And so he's this person who's filled with all this regret, who's really powerful, but is really sad, and then trying to fill that sadness by sleeping with these young women to fill up the hole in his heart that he just can't fill up. And Joe handled that all so beautifully.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe if you were to make the film now, there's a scene where one of these women breaks him down and confronts him about what he's doing and puts him out and calls him out on the table and says, all this stuff that you're doing, and this is what it means. This is what it indicates. So you could see where a scene like that would really even deepen the character more or enrich the Gary Green situation even more. Because you do give Joe that moment when he's sitting on the chair, in the leather chair, telling his truth about what it means to him, kind of opening up a little bit late night to Jack. And you also have that with Zach Cooper as well. That scene with Carl when he's telling him, I lost all my friends. You were bringing that story up a few minutes ago. Yeah. So there's a lot of moments, and it's about after the 40-minute mark, if I noticed correctly, where things start to turn a little bit, and you want to give these characters that we've kind of been shown, these outer characters, that being Jane Seymour and Joe Mantegna and Stacy Keach. You give them a little bit more, and Stacy Keach, of course, is a little bit later on in the film, but you get a little more depth rather than, oh, this is just a producer who screws young women. This is just a rich old lady. This is just a guy who used to write a great film. There's more in the interactions and the honesty that is going on here near the end of the film, or past the 40-minute mark of the film, that lets us connect to these characters a little bit more and weigh in and sense the stakes as it goes along.
That's 100% exactly accurate. That's exactly what I was going for. And it's funny. There are a whole bunch of mistakes that I made, or poor choices in many, many ways. And one of the biggest ones, I remember we did Remains of the Day a while ago. Yes. And there was a comment as they had a screening from one of the executives when they didn't get together at the end, and they leave in that just horrible scene in the rain. Right. And the executive said, oh, there goes $50 million. and I won't say it's a mistake, but this movie is set up like, hey, our heroes are going to beat the evil executives, and they're going to make their movie. And isn't that going to be awesome? That's right. And if I had made that kind of a movie, I might have made more money, wow. But that's not, what I am interested in. And right. If there's any theme in my work, and strangely enough, it applies very much to the Great White Shark films. Yeah. Is I'm really interested in, you think that this is this thing, but in fact, when you look closer, you will find it's more complicated. Right. And that's what I was also interested in, that those people who are jerks, they're like our friends. All of them started off as assistants. All of them started off with dreams. All of them started off this way. And so it isn't that we have our heroic young people going against the bad people. It's right. all of us could end up there, you know?
Yeah. Well, let's get into a couple of patron questions. Let's get into our first one here. Brennan Marr, he asks, and the great Brennan Marr, he was on our Ratatouille episode. Brennan said, did you try to emulate the directing and or artistic style of any director in particular when you were making this film? If so, who?
Not really. It's not the way I think so much. I think I have a lot of influences more than emulating. So like, one of the influences, there's the scene we talked about in Crimes and Misdemeanors where Martin Landau sees his family having the dinner, the Passover, and he's looking at his own flashback, and then he interrupts his own flashback.
Yeah.
And I love that kind of idea. And a lot of that comes from, starting in theater, and theater is so much more able to mess with reality. You know, you could have someone walk into a scene, walk out of a scene, narrate a scene, change what's happening in the scene. And so those things were influenced on multiple moments in the movie where I wanted to kind of break reality a little bit. The voice, probably the biggest thing I'm inspired by is the narration in Fight Club. The way that Fight Club is telling the story to the audience, but it's also interacting and intercut. It's not narration to just explain exposition. It's hopefully a live part of the movie. Whether or not I succeed at that is up to other people to judge, but that's definitely an influence.
Yeah, I had some struggle with that, to be honest with you, because in Fight Club it works because he's in every scene as one character or the other. And I felt like Jack narrating like the scene between Carl and oh God, I can't remember the other guys. Yeah, the guy's name Carl and Zach, when they're having that. Why would he know that story? Why would he even narrate that? So there are moments within the film. That's a great point. Scenes in the film, and of course, this is us talking about it. It's not any kind of like actual criticism, but just like what struck
it is a criticism. That's a totally valid criticism.
Yeah, so I just thought it was odd to see those things. Like if you were to do it now, because also like everybody knows the great narration is Morgan Freeman in Shawshank.
Sure.
Like, how would you change that at all? Would you like maybe adjust some of that narration? Make Jack more like, because I'm sure you've seen the film like 100 times, so you've got thoughts about how you do it now and whatever. Like, what do you feel about the narration as a technique? Because it's the one thing as a teacher, it's the one thing they tell you that is a bit of a cop out in screenwriting. Why did you decide that this was the right move for your film?
I don't have a problem with the narration existing. I like the narration. I think there's too much of it. That's the first thing.
Okay.
And there's lines, definitely. There's one line in particular that I should have cut out of the movie.
Okay.
And I think it genuinely hurt the film. And it's a bummer to me that I held on to it because it meant something to me personally. And this is one of the things, this is like such a basic rule that I broke, is that if it means something to you personally, that's great. But if it doesn't translate to the audience in the way that you want it to, and the line, it's right at the very beginning, and Jack, it's after Carl has sort of taken them through this really dark version of their future, and they're all depressed, and Jack makes a speech to bring it all together. And there's a line of narration where he says, after they're all happy again, he says, "Did I mean it? Of course I did. I meant every full of shit word." And that had a really specific meaning to me. Right. I don't think that's the meaning that went across. So the meaning to me was, it came from actually my dad's 60th birthday.
Oh,
and we're at a huge party with all of his friends. And I'm, 30 something. And I suddenly went, oh, you know what? I'm a grown up now. I should make one of those toasts, and get up and speak. Like that's what I should do. Right. And I'd never done one of those things before. And I thought through it and figured out what I was going to say. And then I had this thought. I was like, when I say this line, my dad's going to cry. I just knew it. It was planned. And I worked it. I'm going to pause here. And this is where I'm going to look. I really, because, I'm a writer. You directed
your own speech. You directed your own speech.
100%. And the thing is, I meant everything I was saying. It
was
absolutely from the heart. But I also was manipulating and directing my own speech, as you say.
Yeah.
Did I mean it? Of course I did. I meant every full of shit word. That's what that line meant to me. But the way I think it comes across in the movie is that he doesn't mean it, that he's full of shit.
Yeah.
And and this is the key mistake in the whole film that I didn't, and it's funny, we had our first screening, like an early rough cut.
Yeah.
And someone watched it. I said, "What'd you think?" They're like, "Oh, I loved it. You knew this guy was an asshole from the beginning, and then he totally betrayed them in the end." And I'm like, "No, that's not what I wanted to. That's not the movie I'm trying to make." And then I spent months re-editing and changing things to try to pull back because to me, what the movie wanted to be, what I wanted to be,
Yeah.
is Jack believes he's doing everything because he loves his friends, and in the end, he
really?
betrays
Okay.
them.
All right.
You know, well, this is why I say this is where I didn't succeed. I think I pulled him back from being as much of an asshole as he was in that first cut, but I didn't, you know, because in a way it's the opposite of what we were talking about with Gary Green and some of these other characters, that you think they're these assholes, but then you see these more complicated sides. Jack, I wanted to be this person that you think is a good guy, and then he does these not so good things. And I failed. You know, that's where I really, as a filmmaker, and I remember, you know, moving this line, moving this reaction shot, changing and softening, and I would say I made it back 60% of the way or 70% of the way, but I didn't make it all the way. And that line, that one line, is one of the key problems that I wish I'd taken out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Jack's not a likable guy throughout the whole film, in my opinion. I don't connect to him. I don't like him. When he does what he does, it's not a surprise to me. I do think the film lets him off the hook way too easily. There should have been the friends going off on him. There should have been like 10 minutes of self-reflection where he's off, like, and his friends want nothing to do with him, because it seems too quick that they're like, but we did this movie. Let's all get it back together and do it again. It just felt like this guy fucked you guys over. Like, there should be a stronger reaction with the amount of work that you've put in. So I do feel that a little bit with Jack, and I also think the narration, when he's narrating what he's going to do before he does it, it makes him come off as calculated through the whole film. So, and that doesn't feel like he's an authentic person. So that, I think I hear what you're saying about pulling it back, but yeah. And I also hear about what you say, that you didn't pull him all the way back to where you felt now in retrospect he would have come across as a sympathetic character, which is ironic because there are human moments that that Chris Connor rather puts in to Jack Ryder in some of his looks and some of the quieter moments. There is, like when he's seeing Sarah after everything that's happened, or when he's talking to the blonde girl when they're coming out of the bar. Like there are human elements to what he's doing. And certainly the last look when he's in the car looking at them when they're shooting that shot for their film that they're making, there is a desire to connect, a desire to reconnect the bridges there. But yeah, I you know, honestly, I didn't like the guy, but I understood in the end why you made the decision you made with him. It made sense.
I'll give you two examples. One, I'm not going to make too specific because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. Right. But one thing first of all, Chris is a phenomenal actor. And anyone who watched him in Altered Carbon, he steals that show, man. He is so good. In fact, directing Chris, like I had to learn how to direct him differently, because frequently with actors, I'll make a somewhat strong direction, knowing that the actor will probably get 60% of the way or 80% of the way there. And so my direction's a little bit stronger. Chris is like driving a Ferrari. Whatever I told him, he did exactly. And I was like, oh, I have to be really, really specific, because he can do whatever I ask. And the one direction I never gave him was, I never said what I just said to you. Everything you're doing is for love. And if I had given him that direction, it would have changed a whole bunch of little things. The other thing is, there's one scene where basically an actor that he was working with was being a jerk to him off camera. And I didn't know this, because I didn't see what was happening to the off-camera dialogue. And so it was a scene that Chris had auditioned with. It's why Chris got the part. Yeah. It was like, he just nailed the scene, and it was the hardest scene to edit. I re-edited probably 50 times, rearranging the dialogue, because the energy was not right. And because the energy is not right in that scene, it's one of the other little pieces of he's acting out of manipulation, not out of love. Yeah. And those are, you know, and it's like, this is in editing, you know, it's like, okay, well, what if I move this line a little later? What if I change this look? What if I use this reaction shot instead of this reaction shot? And I never got it. I never got it to where I wanted it to be. Yeah. You know? Sometimes that's the way it goes when you're making films. And certainly many filmmakers have spoken about, I had to work with what I got. They couldn't get the reshoots. I couldn't get the money and what have you to do those. So, and we'll get into that in just a second. Let's get to Matthew Grumlick. He's got a few questions here. He says, how do you feel out where to cut dialogue to make it natural, fast/slow? And when is is it a coincidence that the writer is kind of the hero of this story? That's the Ben character. Yeah. Well, the first part, I have I haven't.
Mhm.
It's weird to say, like, I have a natural ear for dialogue. That sounds like I'm just praising myself. I'm trying to put it in the right way. There is a way in my head that dialogue is supposed to sound.
Mhm.
And so that it's trying to get it there. Like when I wrote it, there's a rhythm in my head of how the
Yeah.
dialogue should work. And when I'm editing, there's a rhythm in my head. And even, by the way, cutting the Cine-Files, I'll
Yeah.
cut us just so to cut out an or to cut out
Mm.
a line of dialogue didn't go anywhere. Now I'm trying to fit it together and make it feel natural. And there are hundreds and hundreds of dialogue edits in every episode of the Cine-Files. And
Yeah.
I hope most of them you don't notice. A few of them, they're a little bit rough sometimes, and that's because it's like music in your head of
Yeah.
this is how this language is supposed to sound.
Right.
This pause is unnatural. This pause is now makes it feel natural.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Understood. Okay. The second part is
About the writer.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it a coincidence?
I think I don't know. It's funny because I think Aaron just shines in the movie.
He does.
I
He's great.
think
I like
he
him a lot.
really steals every scene he's in. And I, the working on a script for years and never getting to the end of it, that's me too. So like the scene of Chris saying, Orson Welles wrote Touch of Evil in 3 days, and he says, well, I'm not Orson Welles, and Chris says, how do you know? Like that's sort of me thinking about, man, I wonder if I could do it. What could I and it's also, a lot of the assistants mirrors what I was going through, is like, because a lot of it is putting everything on the line.
Yeah.
If you put everything on the line, can you really deliver? It's fine to live in the fantasy world of, if someone would give me, pass me the ball, I'm going to make the big shot. But okay, what if you really do it? And so Ben is a character who is forced to put everything on the line and succeeds. You
also give that speech to Jack when things are starting to fall apart about, hey, you guys have been sitting around bitching that you're not doing the jobs you want to do. This is your opportunity. This is your chance overall to do it. Are you going to step up or not do it? And Ben's the one that says, I'm not going to do it no matter what you say. And then he has to work harder to win Ben over eventually as the producer.
Well, it's really Harlan. It's Stacy Keach showing up that wins
Ben
over.
I think everything. You're right.
I think if Harlan Keyes doesn't show up at that moment, then that friendship is broken.
Right.
That's what I think.
Did you not have another change of clothes besides the suit for Stacy Keach? He's in the garbage out. He's in the garbage in the bar, and then when he shows up to the house, so I imagine he was coming right after work. But I was just like, I'm sure he wears a pair of jeans somewhere.
It's so funny. These are one of you conversations you have with costume people of like, what day is it? How much time has passed? And we decided that's all the same day. Because he tells them to meet him at the bar at 4:00 or whatever.
Right.
And then they come home and Jack is saying, okay, this is now going to be plan B because we lost Harlan, and he shows up.
Right.
But by the way, I know I've mentioned that I cut scenes with Stacy Keach. The one that I cut is, there's actually a scene where Stacy Keach comes in. He shows up at the door, and then he comes in and he yells at Jack and he yells at Ben, and he says, you guys are, assholes. And then the group of them convince him to join them. And what I realize is I did a terrible job shooting it because we were so rushed. But really, I realized is once you see him at the door, it's over. Like there's no reason to have that scene.
Right.
And so even though Stacy was fantastic in it, I cut it out of the movie,
Yeah, it makes sense because you've got the character coming to these guys. So already you imagine he is in on this situation. He wouldn't have shown up, especially the way you've presented the character for the beginning as standoffish and not wanting to be a part of this. The fact that it took them hours to convince him of what was happening and to maybe be a part of it shows that he has strong walls up. And then when he shows up, it's like James Earl Jones going with Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams. Yeah, he's committed. Totally. And by the way, give a shout out to Aaron Himmelstein. For those of you who don't know, he played young Austin in Austin Powers Goldmember, and he's the voice of Desna in the Legend of Korra TV series. So a lot of these actors went on to do a number of things, have done a number of things. So, it's not like that they were early in their career. It's not I don't think it was the first thing they did here, but, from here forward, they've all gone on to do some really incredible stuff. So, how did the casting process go about with this? Was Karen the casting director of this film?
So Karen and Jamie Rudofsky were partners. They were both the casting directors. Jamie is a fantastic casting director.
Yes.
By the way, one silly story, which is no regrets about having Chris Connor play Jack. He's awesome. But there was another actor that Jamie sent the script to, who was an up and coming person who might have wanted to do it. and that actor was Chris Pine.
Wow.
But he couldn't do it because he was shooting this other movie, and the movie he was shooting Star Trek. So there's like an alternate universe. Like if we had shot like 3 months earlier or something, there's an alternate universe in which Chris Pine had that role. Jamie and Karen were amazing. I mean, they're both such advocates for actors. They brought in so many good people to look at, and really, that's what good casting directors do, is really fought for people. Mike Terry, who I adore, I had seen him in a play that I didn't like. And I didn't particularly like him in the play.
Right.
And Jamie was like, no, you have to see him again. You have to bring him in. And we brought him in for the audition, and he was good, like good enough that I wanted to see him in a callback. Right. And in the callback, he was great. Yeah. And then we did a chemistry read. In the chemistry read, he just blew my mind, and he's fantastic. I think he's great in The Assistants. He went on to do years on Bones.
Yes,
he is also the best non-professional cook that I know. The guy is like an amazing cook. He is really, we had him on the show doing Boogie Nights, and he's super smart. He's great. Yeah,
we've tried to get him back. We've talked about bringing him back, I think, before in the past. I think we were talking about Braveheart with him. We couldn't quite make it work, but hopefully,
that's right. Good memory.
Hopefully down the road we'll figure that out. Peter Bylone has come in with a few questions. Peter, we can't ask 35 questions, so I'm gonna try to find one. Let's move over. Well, let me do this. How about director? He says this: The Assistants, was there a part of the film where director Steve had a different vision than writer Steve? If so, which part? And looking back now, which side of you was right? And also, what was the best piece of advice or nugget of wisdom you got from the cast while making this film? Yeah, I mean, we're focusing on Steve Morris, but was there an interactivity here with you in the cast where the cast maybe taught you a lesson or two about directing actors or about the process itself of making the film?
So several things. So the answer is there are actually really three people that were arguing with each other. That's the writer Steve, the director Steve, and the editor Steve.
Okay.
And pretty much the writer and the editor get along pretty well. Both of them are really pissed off at the director. That guy fucked up. So, I mean, like the amount of, because the director, I was under so much pressure and trying to make my day and get stuff done. And I would miss things and miss reaction shots or, directions I didn't give. And, in post, when I'm trying to cut the thing, I'm like, the writer did fine. He's okay. That director's, we got a real problem with him.
Yeah.
As far as actors, there's so many things. So three quick stories.
Okay.
The one is right when we started, the first thing we did when we got the cast was I said, let's have a party, because these people have to be friends. So it's like, let's have a party and hang out.
To know each other. Sure.
And Chris came up to me and he said, I want the party to be at my house. I'm going to throw the party. Because he wanted to. It's funny, we were just doing a movie where we talked about the star of the movie who was a leader in the movie being a leader with the cast and crew. That's exactly what Chris did. And when he threw a party at his house and he took every one of the actors outside to have a private moment with each of them to try to start to establish the relationship. We also, where we shot, there was a big white wall, and nobody wants to shoot against a big white wall. It's not good for lighting. And I'm talking to Rebecca Bell, who's the production designer, and she says, so here's what we could do. We could paint the wall, but then we had to paint it back, and it's going to cost this much money. And she said, or what we could do is make a mural, like hang a huge canvas and make a mural. And I said, oh, I like that idea. And then I said, well, what if we have our cast come in and they paint the mural? So we had another party. And the reason we did it is that I went, oh, you know what happened is Jack manipulated his friends into doing the art in his loft, which makes sense for his character. Yeah. And so the whole wall, that big, bright, colorful wall, all the cast made that. And so, and with Rebecca and the other actual art people supervising and making sure they did it the right way, so that they all felt kind of unified. Stacy Keach, I had a meeting with him like I did with Joe. And
he's so good in the film, by the way. I know he's only got a few scenes, but he knocks it out of the park every time. I grew up loving Stacy Keach and Mike Hammer. And so to see him saying your lines, to see him playing this character and giving so much depth to a character that only has so much screen time was really great. But anyway, sorry, I mean, I just wanted to
no. Listen,
Stacy.
interrupting to praise Stacy Keach. I 100% agree. That guy is amazing.
Yeah.
So I have my meeting with him, and he shows up, and this is the greatest feeling. I can't even tell you. He shows up with my script in his hand, dog-eared, highlighted, notes in the margins, and he has like 50 questions for me.
Wow.
Which just felt, I can't even describe how that felt to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking, and of course he'd worked with Orson Welles and he'd worked with John Huston.
Right.
And this was this crazy connection. And I asked him some questions, and he said, and what's funny is I've now heard this from other actors working with John Huston. He said, John Huston only gave me 2 directions. And then he did his John Huston impression, which was a little more, a little less. And so which I just loved. It's and great. We're doing the moment where he calls Jack on the phone.
Right.
And he has to say it's Harlan fucking Keys. And we recorded when we shot the bar scene. So we're just getting wild lines. And he did it into the mic, and I said, a little more. And he went, okay. And he did it a little more. And I went, a little more. Really? And I did a little more. And then that's how we got that take of it's Harlan fucking Keys. Wow. So that was just he's so great, and he's such a damn pro. And once he locked into that character, man, I doubt I gave him. There was one other moment. We were doing the scene where he is reading the script. Yeah. And we had done 3 takes, I think. And the 3rd take was good. It wasn't great. It was totally good. And as always, we were under huge time pressure. We were rushing like crazy. And I'm in Video Village, which means I'm watching this on a monitor. And I had to walk all the way around the building to get in to actually talk to the actors in person. Because directors who talk to their actors through a radio, I don't really like. I think you need to be in person. And I'm debating, like, do we do another take? Do we not do another take? What do we do? And I just decided, you know what? Let's move on. And I'm walking in about to say move on, and Stacy does this. And I go, okay, we're going to do one more. And then that's the take that's in the movie, of course.
Well, I will say this. I want to give you some compliments for every scene. For whatever reason, every scene with Jane Seymour is so well shot, so well done. I think those scenes stand out for a number of reasons. The wig works perfectly, and I've seen a number of movies recently. The Flag Day film with the Sean Penn; those are some terrible wigs he puts on his daughter in that film. But the wig on Jane Seymour works so perfectly, and I thought you did a really excellent job with the cinematographer, who we'll talk to a little bit later, framing those scenes and shooting all those scenes. It was believable that this was a place that this woman would live in. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like you guys rented a house and put her in it. She looked like she lived here. It was very lived in. And I wonder what was the process with that? Because also it's lit a little more yellowy than any of the other scenes. Was that to convey that image of wealth and gold and richness?
Yes.
Okay.
100%. Right. Yeah. It's so first of all, that's Jane's wig. And Jane she was insistent on it. She's like, I have the wig for the character. Jane had a very, very strong opinion about her costumes, which is great. Her wardrobe is awesome. That basically Jane was shot entirely in 2 days.
Wow.
Her whole role. So every single thing that's in her house, that's 1 day of shooting, from the dogs in the bathroom to the bedtime stuff.
Wait,
all in
you
one
shot
day.
in her house?
No. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's you mean the character's house? Sorry. No. Go ahead.
By the way, Jane's house in Malibu.
Oh,
that's
I'm
nice.
Sure.
It's a nice place.
That Quinn Medicine woman, it buys a nice house. Good.
We had to look forever. I mean, we looked at so many houses because we needed a house that could do that and have the pool for Zach, because we couldn't have all the moves.
Right.
And so we had to have a house that did both. And then we found out we were losing. We thought we were going to have 3 days with Jane, but we only had 2 because she had another shoot and there's other stuff going on.
Right.
And so figuring out how to shoot, it's like 7 or 8 scenes, including scenes with animals.
Right.
That was
the dogs. Yes.
That was a brutal day. And Jane is just a pro. Like she, rarely would need a second take. She had the character down. It was just really logistically, how could we move through that house and get all those shots?
Let me ask you real quick. Is this a process when you're doing a film like I did a film with Armando Sante for my friend Andre Gordon, and it was about meeting his quota. And if you meet his quota, he'll read your script and do it. Were these people reading your script first, and then you were going out to them and seeing if you could meet their quota? or were these people that Jamie and Karen kind of thought about, wanted to bring into the movie? I mean Mantegna, I mean Jane Seymour, I mean Stacy Keach, and knew that they could fit within the budget their quotas. What was the process with that?
So I'll defer a little
curtain,
bit
so to speak,
to Karen to some degree, but what I'll say is Karen reached out to Joe because she knew him, and he read the script and liked the script.
So irrelevant of quota, it was the script first.
I mean, we had to come up with a number that was reasonable. But
of course. But it was the script that brought him in first.
Yeah. Okay. And I would say, again, it feels like I'm blowing my own horn or something, but the script was a big motivator for a lot of people. Okay. You know, the script, we got a lot of people submitted. So what happens? You put the script out, you put out what are called breakdowns saying we're looking for these people. My memory, Jane Seymour submitted herself for the role. Wow. Now I don't know, maybe whether she read it or her agent read it and said this sounds like something good for you, but she wanted to do it. And then Stacy, what happened with Stacy Keach? So we had a small connection because my good friend Soren, his dad Bill Oliver, was a professor of theater at Berkeley, and he was Stacy Keach's professor in the early 60s. So Soren grew up with Stacy as like kind of the older brother, you know, student. So we had a small connection to him. It was funny. I heard Stacy interviewed years later talking about Bill Oliver and how much this guy taught him about acting. And what happened was basically I totally, Joe said, so Stacy Keach going to do it? And Stacy said, is Joe Mantegna going to do it? And I told them both yes. And then they both said yes.
And Jane was like, I don't give a shit if either of these two do it. I'm doing it.
Here's what we didn't know, because I'm an idiot, is I didn't know Jane at the time was married to James Keach. She was married to Stacy's brother.
Oh, right.
And I didn't even know that when we were, I mean, I found it out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But that also, I think, was part of why Jane, you know, because she knew Stacy, even though they don't have any scenes together.
Right. James Keach from Wildcats, the Goldie Hawn film. I remember it being the villain in that.
And Walk the Line, and
Yes, Walk the Line. That's right. Let's see. So let's move quickly to some Great White Shark stuff, because I know that's a part of Beyond the Cage of Fear. That's part of this as well in the title. Let's see. Well, was there a day, a scene, a sequence that surprised you at how well it was executed? I'm assuming that when shooting a documentary, you've got a framework for the story you want to tell, but then you have to go to where the story takes you, especially when dealing with something as predictable as Animal in the Wild. How big a difference was there between the movie you thought you'd make and the movie that you did make with Great White Shark? And let me add something else to this. When it comes to the editing, is it easier to tell your story if it's scripted, like The Assistants, or if it's not, like Great White Shark Beyond the Cage of Fear?
So first of all, editing wise, they're both hard, but in really different ways.
Okay.
I'll tell you a story of two approaches to documentaries. So I worked on some Cousteau films, of some of their underwater projects that were on like PBS, and the Cousteaus have it down. They have a system,
of course, by this point.
Yeah. So they send a camera crew out to some location. The camera crew does a bunch of dives and they do a bunch of background information. And then Fabian or Celine or Jean-Michel, who's Jacques' son, they show up and they do an interview with the head scientist, and then they do a dive.
Yeah.
And so now we have the footage that was shot before they got there. We have an interview and we have a dive, and then they repeat that over and over and over again. It's very predictable. Not that it's easy to make those films. It's not. It's hard. But they have a plan and they're executing the plan. Hoover, my partner, that's not how it works. Hoover is interested in stuff. So the first film that I did, which was Mind of the Demon, which Fabien Cousteau was in, that's how I met the Cousteaus. They had an idea of making the shark submarine to swim with sharks, and then they just went out and tried to do it. They had no idea what was going to happen. And I got brought on after they had shot most of it as the editor, and they handed me a box of 200 hours of footage, of tapes, most of them unlabeled, no camera logs, which is all unprofessional. And I just had to go through and watch 200 hours of tapes and figure out an hour movie in there.
Wow.
You know, and so that took me probably 4 or 5 months just to watch the footage.
Right.
You know, and then trying to figure out. So an editor on a documentary has way more control than an editor on a feature, because I created what that film was about. And then on Beyond the Cage of Fear, which I was involved with from the beginning, it was still, we're going to go out and try a bunch of stuff. We have no idea what's going to happen.
Right.
And based on what's going to happen, that's what's going to create the story. And for that, it really was me finding a structure and and an idea of a way to get into it, and then framing the doc around that. And there's all sorts of things that were super interesting
Right.
that aren't in the movie because they didn't fit into that structure, you know?
Okay. Anything else to add on to that in terms of the scenes itself, or there was a day that you really thought you nailed it, as Peter Bylone is asking?
On the documentary?
Yeah, or on the assistants, either one. If
Well,
you've got
the assistants,
two
I think
moments. Yeah.
the assistants, I think the highlight is that scene with Joe and Chris
Okay.
at night. That was
Yeah.
where you could hear a pin drop
Right.
on the set. Everyone knew they were watching two great actors just doing it, and that was really, really cool. On the documentaries are so spread out, so I don't know if there's like a moment. I did lots of interviews, and then I would do more interviews, and then we realized we needed some more shots, so we took the boat out to Catalina and we shot a bunch of stuff there, and it's all kind of fitting it together in pieces over time. Yeah, and there's some edits that are, but it would be too in the weeds to explain why the edits, because hopefully with good editing you don't see what it is I did. I know that I did some crazy stuff, but you wouldn't notice it. I think it was idea wise of like ways. It was when we finally figured out the structure, because I think that here's the big thing about that. The part of it is, can this mermaid swim with a great white shark? Which is a ridiculous and stupid idea that I was against from the beginning. But it was Hoover's idea. And the way we worked together was Hoover was in charge of the boat and the expedition, and I was in charge of the film. And so I was like, this is dumb. Yeah. And so the big challenge was to go like, how do we get an audience to accept that doing this stupid thing makes sense? And so part of it was that what I found was we had to slowly but surely, step by step, change how people think about sharks until at the end, not that they think it makes sense, but go like, oh, I feel differently about this than I felt at the beginning. And so, because really the way it was shot is everything was happening at once.
Right.
And what I did was I said, no, this happens in a certain order. And this thing that happened leads to that thing happening, which isn't really true. All the things that happened, but they didn't happen in the order exactly that they happened in the real world.
That makes sense. Let me see. I want to hit a couple of these questions, and I want to ask you one before Joe comes in, if he's going to come in. Steve, would you say the ending is one of optimism or more like a cautionary tale?
I think it's a mixed ending. I think it's both.
Okay.
I think Sarah really she goes through the darkest journey of all the characters.
She's berated into doing what she does, which is really uncomfortable to watch. But yeah, she has a dark journey for sure.
Well, I'll say what's interesting. I remember I had set up when I was writing the script that that Gary was a womanizer. That has been part of his character,
right?
And I had even had this idea of him talking to Jack about womanizing, like the idea of, the Scotch is aged 24 years. How old is she? Those lines were already in the script, but had no plan of it being Sarah. And then I suddenly went, what if it's Sarah? And I went immediately, no way, I can't do that. That is terrible. It made me super uncomfortable. And I told Karen and our good friend Sarah Foster, and they said, no, you have to do that. And what I like is that what happens in the movie is that the cynical guy, Carl, who pushes her to do this, he's saying, whatever you do, you got to take advantage. And he's the one who can't go through with it with Zach.
Right.
And Sarah, who is I would never do anything that's not moral. She's the one who does this thing. And so there's a reversal between the two of them. Yeah. But anyway, in answer to your question, or in answer to whoever asked this question, I think for Sarah and for the gang, it's optimistic. Ben has learned that he can actually write this script and that he really is a writer. Sarah has come through this dark time. Carl has shaken off some of his veneer and is willing to, be more honest with Sarah, and their relationship is back together. It's a cautionary tale for Jack. Jack's going to be a really, really unhappy person.
Yeah. So I wanted something more from the ending. I wanted harder conversations. I wanted the Carl, and what's her name again? The character rather, Sarah. I wanted that argument. Like, you guys be right. I did this. And I like, this is so for her to be like, let's just put the movie together. It just seemed like an odd decision to make, and in 2000 and in 2009 maybe it fits. I think now in 2020 with these eyes, which is what I was trying to do the whole time I was watching the film, was like, how would this be different now? It was interesting because both her and the editor character, she is also dressed up and kind of put out there to be to try to seduce this guy or whatever. So I think there was work to be done with the female characters in the film, and I think now in 2021, I think you'd be more aware of that, I would imagine, to flesh that out a little bit more and give them a bit more agency in the movie.
I wouldn't do either of those things, frankly. I mean, you know, I mean, like, I don't.
Oh, you mean in the movie? You wouldn't do
in the movie?
Yeah, fair.
Yeah,
fair,
it's
totally
just
fair.
it's the world's different, and I think
you're right.
Post Harvey Weinstein, the dressing up the girl to be cute. I mean, I love the scene. I think Tate is fantastic, and Joe Hernandez-Kolsky.
Yeah,
it is I think the scene went great, but I wouldn't have done it that way because I've changed, you know, and I certainly post Me Too. Like, there's a difference. There's a difference between how we think of Gary Green, I think, today, post Harvey Weinstein, than how we might have thought about him then. And Jack being a person that's heading in that direction, I don't think that works. I think it's wrong. And so I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, you don't call Gary Green out. Like, in the end, he doesn't get punished in any way, shape, or form. He gets an $81 million film or $80 million film, and all his behavior is in essence rewarded. And that's weird to see in the long run.
I don't necessarily feel that people that do bad things have to get punished in movies, because sometimes in life people don't get punished. I mean, there's all sorts of movies where people do horrible things and don't get punished. But I do think that the movie has to be aware of that, and this movie is not, you know, because of the way I perceive things and the way I wrote in 2007 or 2006 when I was writing this thing, you know. And like I said, I wouldn't do it this way now.
Right, exactly. I think that's it. And every artist has that, right? Every artist, just 12 years ago. Yeah, this 12 years ago shit I wouldn't do in terms of acting or voiceover wise as well. 5 years ago, even some of the stuff I do now on camera. I will ask one last question before we hopefully get Joe Mantegna to join us here. And this is one we talked about off camera, so we'll bring it up now a little bit. And there was, you know, kind of like Jack, there was a little controversy around the film as well with you and some of our friends who wanted to be in the film, wanted to be cast in the film. We talked about this off camera, and you said you were willing to talk about it. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that maybe like what the journey was for you through that process? We saw Jack through this process. Did you sense that this was a weird kind of connection that your character Jack and you kind of went through a little bit in terms of some hurt feelings?
So you've done this with only 3 minutes before Joe shows up. So
I think 3 minutes is good. I think you can do it in 180 seconds.
So am I aware that there's a connection between Jack, who turns on his friends, and the fact that I didn't cast my friends in this film? Yeah, I'm aware of that. This thing was extremely painful, particularly because no one talked to us about it. Right. No one came to us and said, "Hey, we're upset with you about this thing." For years later, I didn't know that this was going on. In my mind, Karen and I had demonstrated over and over again for a decade that we cared about our friends, about their artwork. I cast people, I wrote projects for people, I directed things for people, I cut people's reels.
I've been in your stuff. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, every time someone had a movie, Karen and I tried to show up to be on the crew, to be extras. If people had plays or showcases, we were there. And maybe most importantly, every project Karen was hired on, the first discussion we had was, are there things we could bring you could bring the friends in for? And she brought friends in many, many times and fought for them to get cast. And so this idea that we didn't care or didn't take it seriously or didn't believe that our friends are incredibly talented, which I do. Yeah. You know, but what I had said when we had that reading was, I said, listen, everyone, I love you all. You're all great. You're all past the audition. You're made it to the callbacks if you're interested in being in this film, but I can't guarantee anybody I'm going to cast you because this is too big a risk, you know, like, and I know,
of course, your money's involved. There's a lot involved here. Yeah.
And I know, you know, we've had this conversation many, many times. Like, you're doing your own shows. You're doing hundreds of shows. You're bringing on guests all the time. I know how seriously you take every single person you bring on.
Oh yeah.
And you wouldn't, because you've told me, bring on anyone that you thought wasn't going to be the right person.
Right.
And it's like, for me, I didn't have hundreds of shows. I could do this once.
Yeah.
You know, and
with your money
maybe,
on the line. Yeah.
Maybe never again. I mortgaged my house to do it. I put hundreds of thousands of dollars of my own money that was going to take decades to pay off to make the film. I had people that were the people that I love most in the world investing in me, their hard-earned money. Like, it wasn't just the cast, it was every location, every outfit, every camera angle. I did everything I could to make the best possible movie I could make.
Yeah.
And to be doing that, and that's what, you know, that's what you're trying to do. That's what we're all trying to do. Absolutely. And to find out that, you know, and did I make the right choices? Who's to say? I mean, like, I made the choices that I believed were right artistically for my film. You know,
I think I might have more of a complaint if there were, I think I might have a complaint, period, if I felt any of these actors didn't do a good job at their roles, but I don't. You know, does the movie 100% work in every scene? Maybe not, but I think the actors absolutely nailed it from top to bottom, and they're really incredible in the film, Steve. So yeah, I mean, and this is part of the game sometimes, and certainly now with in retrospect, there is a way to approach this now that you're aware of it, maybe in a different manner if you want, or not, because you did what was best for the film, and that's something that you, I think you can feel solace in for sure. All right, I just wanted to ask that, and maybe we'll revisit it later when Karen comes on, but we do have coming to us to join us in this conversation, very honored to have this gentleman. He's one of the actors that we've admired for years. He is Gary Green in your movie. He was also our guest for The Adventures of Robin Hood. Let us bring him on now, the great, incredibly talented, and our joy to bring him on, Joe Mantegna. Mr. Mantegna, how are you?
With an introduction like that, how should I be? I mean, you know, I'm good.
Joe, it's so great to see you. I'm just happy. I'm just happy to say hi.
No, my pleasure.
Well, let me leave you two alone for just a second. I have to grab my dog and bring him in here because she's scratching on the door. I'll be right back.
I got one right on the floor right here. Yeah.
Joe, I got two stories. So this is what I remember, because when we had met, I think during Joan of Arcadia, when Karen was working on that, and then you were kind enough to join the cast of this movie. And here's what I remember is that you said you were always a little bit concerned when you don't know the people until you see what kind of catering they have. And you thought that our food was okay, so we passed the catering test.
Yeah, I mean, you have to get your priorities straight. I mean, sometimes you can learn a lot just by what they decide to feed the actors. You know what I mean?
And you also, there's something you said. You were working with Chris Connor, and Chris Connor came to me and said that you gave him one of the greatest pieces of advice he had ever gotten, which is you were running lines with him, and you said, "This is the job. The job isn't up there. The job is here, running lines up there." And you also said that it doesn't matter if it's a huge movie or a tiny movie. The job is always exactly the same. Does that sound like what you said?
That sounds right. I mean, it's always been my motto that I don't really care much, or I don't concern myself with the business of what I do, but I deeply concern myself with the work that I do. So in other words, the business is the business, and the business is going to be what it's going to be. It's this huge conglomerate of things, whether it's the theater, whether it's film, whether it's television, whatever it is. It's all going to be there, and people concentrate on all those different aspects of it. But when you got the job, once you got the job, it's just all about, that thing. It's just about doing that thing, and the rest will take care of itself. The business is just the frame for the picture. You have to make the picture.
Let me ask you something, Mr. Mantegna.
Yeah.
First of all, your hair looks fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, well, it's all nature. I had nothing to do with it. It's all chromosomes at this point. Yeah.
I have to use gel to make it look this way. Yours is just natural. I'm very jealous. But let me kiss Steve's butt a little bit. What was it about the script that really spoke to you? Did you ask this, Steve, already? I don't know if you have. Okay.
No.
What was it about the script that drew you to play this character? And you've known numerous producers during your career. So what was it about this character, Gary Green, and the script itself that you felt was something you could sink your teeth into?
Well, that's one of those questions that it's almost impossible to get specific. No matter what you would be talking about, no matter what, you could bring up any film I've ever done or any television show or any play I've ever done and say, well, what is it exactly? And I would give you the same answer. And the same answer is I mean, I could sum it up with a phrase that I've lived by: if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
So my feeling is when I read something, and again, I can't get specific about it, but something will either resonate or not. In other words, you say to yourself, you know what, I like this, and I think I know where I can go with this. And if you can say that to yourself, then you're halfway there. You know what I mean? You're more than halfway there, really, if you can say to yourself, you know what? Then you got to go into the fine points. You check off, okay, now who else is in it? Who's directing it? But those aren't, in a way, those are secondary. In other words, very rarely would those be things that would keep me from doing the project. It's just information that I need to have.
Right.
But if I like the material, and I like what my place is within that material, that's enough for me, because at the end of the day, all I'm expending really is time and effort. So you want to put the time and effort into something. I'll give you an example. I remember when I first read the script of Searching for Bobby Fischer.
Oh my God!
They send me that. Yeah, no, they send me the script. When I read the script, I didn't know who the hell Steve Zalian was. It didn't matter. I mean, and I didn't know who else was going to be in the movie. I knew none of these things. But I read the script and I went, oh man, unless I'm kidding myself, this is one of the best written things I've read in a long time. And ironically, I just done the movie Bugsy. And I went to a park. Yeah, we were doing we got nominated for Best Picture that year. And so I think I went to some event. And while I was at the event, Ben Kingsley happened to be there because he's in Bugsy as well.
Right.
And so we're sitting together at the dinner table, and he says to me, he goes, Joe, I've heard I've heard from the producers or whatever that you've been sent a script of Searching for Bobby Fischer as well. I said, oh yeah, Ben, yeah, I did. I said, yeah. And then he mentioned to me that they had offered him this role of Pandolfini. I said, yeah, they offered me the role of the dad. I said, tell me, what do you think? He said, well, I think it's one of the finest scripts I've read in my career. And I went, well, that's it. Okay. I'm not so nuts after all. I thought, I was just satisfied that I thought, well, maybe my good taste, or my taste was hopefully as in line with an actor I so respected. You know what I mean? So all I'm saying is it's just it's a version of that. And I've been around a long time now. And so I have nothing else to trust but my taste or judgment. Now, if it screws up, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you're basing your decision on the material and how it resonates to you, then that's it. If you can't say that, then you're doing it for other reasons. And there's nothing wrong with that either. People look at it and say, well, this is shit. I really don't know what the hell I'm going to do with it. But geez, they're throwing a lot of money at me, and I really, I need it. I have 4 lawsuits and 6 divorces or something. Maybe that comes into the play with people. But you know what I mean. But for me, I've been happily married for almost 50 years, and so that wasn't a factor. So it's all good.
That's all.
So it's all good. I hope that's a long answer to your question.
I love it. I
liked it. You know what I mean? It was a good. I thought it was very well written, and I liked the character. And so let's go, man. Let's do it.
I like it. I liked it. What else do you want? Let's bring on someone who was instrumental from what Steve said in bringing you on to the film. She was one of the casting directors for the film, and a friend of yours, I believe, in Italy, in food and in love. Karen P. Morris, how are you?
Hi there. Hi, Joe. It is so good to see your face. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, no. My pleasure. No, my pleasure. You're a couple of the good guys. So, happy to do it.
The Italy thing that John is talking about, I don't know if you remember this, Joe, but between season 1 and season 2 of Joan of Arcadia, Steve and I ended up going to Italy for a trip. And I didn't think anything about that, but when I came back and we were at our first table read for season 2, I was talking about it to somebody, and you came in and you were very upset with me. You're like, Karen, you went to Italy and you didn't talk to me, and you didn't get my recommendations, and you didn't get my where you're supposed to go. And I was like,
I sent you to my cousin's place. Yeah,
I didn't know I had that relationship with you, Joe. But next time I will totally call you.
Well, there you go. Well, the magic word was Italy. You know what I mean?
I know, and
you had me at Italy.
I'm half Italian myself, and so it's a special place to be. But
Well, Karen, well, next time you go,
definitely.
You were one of the producers on the film, as Karen, as well as one of the casting directors here. What was the process for you as you were working with Steve, the director, and bringing on Joe Mantegna and being in charge of bringing in all these actors who've gone on to do wonderful things and certainly still booking work left and right? What was the process like for you as you were going through all this, getting all these people together?
Well, it was interesting. I mean, obviously, part of what Steve and my relationship is and was at the time was we see very much similarly when it comes to art. We have a lot of shared tastes, shared loves of certain films, certain TV shows, certain actors,
Yes.
all of that kind of stuff. And so when he started writing this, it was really fun to watch the process and read the different, versions of it. And then when we really started getting serious about it, which, there were many, many years where we would talk about stuff. We talk about stuff, but we would never actually do a thing. And when we finally decided we were going to do this, I have to actually give some props to Jamie Rudofsky, my co-casting director, because we sent it to her pretty early in our friendship. And we were walking our dogs one day and she said, "Karen, we have to make this movie. We have to do whatever we need to do to make this movie." She's like, "This is such a good movie. We need to make this movie." And so I think it was partially her enthusiasm that really spurred us on to actually take the leap of faith to do it, because it is a big thing to throw your life up in the air and mortgage your house and do the kind of things that we did here. And then the next thing we started doing is the three of us would sit down and spitball ideas. And part of that was, who we might have access to, but part of that was, hey, dream scenario, who do you want for this thing?
Right.
And Joe happened to check two of those boxes simultaneously, which was an absolute, dream for all of us, is the fact that I actually had a way to reach out to him that was more personal than just reaching out to an agent. But also knowing that when Steve was writing it, in a lot of ways, there was definitely a feel in his mind of someone, and Joe fits that bill so beautifully. And so it was a similar kind of thing. And then like Steve had said earlier, Jamie has such an amazing breadth of work. And she does a lot of theater as well as film and television, which that's one of the things I fell in love with her about her when I met her. Yeah. Because theater is very special to me. It's very special to Steve. I know it is for you, John. And obviously I know it is for you, Joe. So those of us who are based or sort of are grounded in the theater, it's a different process in a lot of ways. And so we tried to imbue those ideas into what we were doing with the assistants. We tried, like Steve said, with the parties, and we really tried to find ways to create the camaraderie that comes out of rehearsal periods and things like that. And even though in films you don't tend to get that kind of stuff, we wanted to try to make that happen. And because we had such an amazing group of kids playing those roles, they all just went with it, and they all bonded really beautifully, and so it was a lot of fun.
Shows on screen, that's for sure. Steve,
Joe, I had a question for you, and I know obviously we made this movie a long time ago. For me and for Karen, it was literally years of our life. For you, it's like 4 or 5 days. So if you don't remember, I totally understand. But I know one of the big things you were excited about in doing the film was getting to act in a scene with Stacy Keach, and I was wondering if you have any memory of that.
Yeah, I do, and because that's another one of the great things of being in this business is that I suppose it's like being an athlete or a rock and roll star in a way that sometimes you get to meet your people within your peer group that you've kind of admired in your life, And so, I mean, I think of Stacy Keach, and I think of when I was an acting student back at Goodman School of Drama back in the 60s. I mean, Stacy Keach was one of those theater guys that you kind of thought of like, wow, God, he did, Indians. He was like, in other words, he was just one of those guys that you thought to yourself, boy, wouldn't it be nice to have a career like the track he's on? You know what I mean? So to get the opportunity, and also it's a testament to like, okay, these are the kind of people you want to work with. I mean, I remember I became very close friends with Peter Falk because we wound up touring. We toured the play Glengarry Glen Ross, the national tour for like 6 months after the Broadway run.
So good.
He played Shelley Levine, just for the tour. He never did it with me on Broadway, but when we did the national tour, he was Shelley Levine. So for 6 months we toured, and we became very close right up to his passing. But one of the things I'll never forget, he's among many things we talk about, he said to me, he goes, "Joe, when given the opportunity, always work with the good guys, work with the talent. They'll never hurt you." You know what I mean? And I mean, and in his way, I mean, and this is, he's right. I mean, in the sense, whether it's the director, whether it's your fellow actors, whatever, if you're working with people who've already proven themselves for a certain quality, he's right. The odds are they're not going to hurt you because because you're of a like mind. Hopefully you think of yourself as being, up to their level, and you're gonna make music together.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a little of that, I was impressed with that. And the other thing is, I got to say, and it's even more so for me today. I mean, I have an assistant who, you met my assistant, Dan Ram, back then. Mm. September 11th will be not only the 20th anniversary of 9/11, but it'll be the 20th year that he's been my assistant.
Wow.
I mean, so he's been with me for 20 years. And ironically, I hired him. Well, it's actually on September 10th. It was the night before. I had to go do a press thing. I had to do a press thing on the Anaheim, and we had talked about him perhaps working for me. I'd never had an assistant in my life, but I was just getting ready to start a new series called First Monday with James Garner, where Supreme Court, and I was the lead, and I knew I was going to be inundated with work. And so I thought, wow, an assistant. Yeah, and I've never had a publicist, manager, any of that. I used to keep my circle very small, but I thought I might really need help. So I said, you know what? So on the way in the limo, I said, ride with me in the limo out to this press thing, and we'll talk about it there and back, which we did. And it was the night of September 10th, 2001. So that night, on the way back, after we'd been talking in the car both ways, I said, you know what? Let's give it a shot. We'll start tomorrow, Tuesday, and let's see what goes, because that was supposed to be my kind of like my first day at work on First Monday. Well, then the world exploded that morning. And of course, he called me and says, wow, hey, yeah, I know. Okay, well, we'll have to put this on hold for a day or two. But he's still there, and he's turned into an incredible assistant in the sense he produces his own show on the Outdoor Channel now. Oh, wow. He's really blossomed into an incredible talent on his own. And I think back on that film and what storyline and this and that and the relationships and all that, and it's just kind of it has a personal kind of connection for me.
Yeah, because you groomed Jack to become successful when he does in the movie. Now you've groomed Dan to become successful when he's done. Yeah, I can see the connection. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it also shows that you are exactly not the kind of boss that we see in the movie.
Well, because you don't want to play yourself.
Because Dan wouldn't have stuck around so long.
No, you don't want to play yourself. You want to always play against type. You know what I mean? That's always fun.
I think that's such a great story. My dad, who was an optometrist in San Francisco, he had people that worked for, not only have people that worked for him for decades, but that multi-generations. So the daughter of my dad's receptionist, she worked for my dad. The families all came. It was just part of the family. And your story just reminds me of that. And that's so much the kind of person I want to be. I want to create a situation where people feel good, because so much I'm sure you've seen far more than me. So much of Hollywood creates a lot of situations where people feel really shitty, and I don't want to be around.
Yeah, no, there's no need for that. I mean, I always took being number one on the call sheet very seriously for that reason, because I've certainly been in many other numbers on a call sheet over my career. But when I got to the point where I would start to be number one on the call sheet, and I learned a lot from people like Tom Hanks. I did an episode of Bosom Buddies back in the day.
Love that show.
Oh yeah, and I played this like Arab chic. I mean, it was back in the days when ethnically anybody could play anybody and it was okay. You didn't get arrested for it. So I was playing this Arab chic, and it was a gambling scene in a casino, and whatever. So here was Tom dressed, in a dress and doing the stuff he did then, with Bosom Buddies. But he was. I'll never forget that at the read-through, that first read-through, he went around the table and said hello and just warm welcome to everybody at the table, even guys. And I had a few lines in it. It wasn't a big part, but it was a featured role. But some of the people just had like half a line, and he was just. And I thought to myself, wow, what a classy thing to do, man. Because here you are, you're there for that one episode of a show that's already been on, and you're one of the new guys, and you don't know anybody, and you're just hoping nobody yells at you or you get fired. And I even remember that first day, we found out we lived in the same kind of neighborhood, and his car broke down. And can I give him a ride home, which I did, Yeah. And then of course, then we wound up doing Money Pit years later, together. But I learned from that, and I always said to myself, if I ever get to be number one on the call sheet, I'm going to try to follow an example like that. And I've always tried to do that. I think I did that on Joan of Arcadia, and I certainly did it.
Definitely.
All the years on Criminal Minds.
I was just going to say, I mean, the fact that you wanted to talk to me about Italy recommendations. I
just think it's important.
I was a casting assistant.
No, I know, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean the job description means nothing to me. I mean, I don't care if it's the guy cleaning the ashtrays on the set. That's what Steve said is correct. if you set the tone for the people in charge, it all trickles down from there. If the guy at the very top, the man or woman at the very top, has a certain attitude, that's the parameters you have now set. And you set a bad one, it's all going to be a bad situation and not going to be fun. But if you kind of set it to like, hey, you know what? We're all lucky to be doing what we do. Let's make the best of it. And then if that trickles down, you make it a nice experience, regardless of the outcome. You know what I mean? Sometimes things don't work out. Well, you hope they do. It does, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You've made a wonderful experience, and then the chips are going to fall where they fall anyway.
There's a great line, Ocean's 13, where George Clooney says to Pacino's character, he says, "There's a code amongst guys who shook Sinatra's hand, and you broke that code." There's a way of doing things, right?
Martin Sheen shaking his hand too. So
there you go. So you understand, yeah. Well, Joe, we're at the 20-minute mark. If you want to stick around, you can. We're going to bring in.
I do have to go. Actually, okay. I was going to say I had to run before 5:30 anyway, but I'm glad I was able to make it.
Thank you so much.
These are two really, honest to God. You're both special people, honest to God. I love the Morrises, and so. But I would have done even if they weren't, because I like the material. I would have done this film. So I wasn't doing them. It wasn't because I was just doing them a favor. Right. I mean, you know what I mean. It was a good project. I'm glad I did it, and it made the icing on the cake. It was that these two people were behind it. So I love you. Love you both.
Joe, I want you to know that Joan of Arcadia and The Assistants are probably two of my pinnacle parts of experiences in.
Oh yeah, for me, I mean, Joan of Arcadia. I had a development deal for CBS for Joan of Arcadia. You may or may not have known that.
No.
So CBS came to me because of the success of the miniseries The Last Dawn. They came to me because it had done. Well, it had done so well. They came to me and says, "Look, we want to give you a development deal. We'll send you 1 million scripts, and whatever you want, we'll greenlight, basically." And I read all these scripts, and the one that I read, I see, it's a thing called Joan of Arcadia. I went, "Oh, this is great. The one thing I want to do, the lead is like an 18-year-old girl, and I'm not the lead. It's not, it's my development deal, but I thought this is the one I got to do. This should be on television. So let's do it." And I was involved in all the casting for Amber, for Mary Steenburgen, for Jason Ritter, everybody.
Jason and I are still in touch. I have so many contacts from people that I just still love and reach out to. Although Aaron
I love them all.
This was part of Joan of Arcadia.
I love them all, and to this day, I'm glad we at least did the 2 seasons we did, because I still think it was important television and needed to be done, and I'm proud that we did it. But anyway, you were all part of it. Thank you. I'll see you guys again, I'm sure. John,
very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Montaigne. Take care.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Wow, what a great situation to have Joe Mantegna here hanging out with us.
He's just the best.
Yeah.
Best.
He's just the best.
Let's bring on 2 of the assistants and the DP. First, let's bring on one of the actresses that's been on our show, Steve. She is incredible. Way back when, at the nascent stages, is that what they say, of our podcast. Kathleen Early is here as well. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi.
Yay.
The great Sarah Bryant. And I hope I say this right. Tate Hanyok is also here. Hi, Tate.
Tate.
Hi.
Oh, excitement.
And as we said, the DP of the film himself, Aaron Torres, is joining us. So a full house here as we all get together and you all relive the assist. So let's start. I want to ask both Tate and Kathleen a question. Now, I mean, it's been like 12 years since this film came out, but we've kind of I revisited it this morning again. I watched it this morning in bed, just thinking about all the different. Well, easy, baby. Easy, sweetie. All the different things that happen in the film. When you look back on the characters now, when you look back on the experience, what's the things that stick out for you from the experience? Because all of you have gone on in this cast to do some incredible work. What was it like, including this young upstart, Joe Mantegna? What was it like to do all the things that you did and look back on the film now?
I can let you go first, Kathleen. I feel like you were more the leader of the group. But I have to.
I hadn't watched it in a long time, and I watched it today. And my 10-year-old was sitting with me when I first turned it on and watching the very beginning. And he's kind of sitting there watching it, and he's watching. And then the credits come up, the opening credits, and he goes, you're in this. He had seen me on screen multiple times already. And he had no idea.
Nothing like your children to bring you back to reality, right?
And so I was like, yeah, I guess I'm in this. But I didn't say, you've been watching me. It was like, yeah, it's, something I did. But and looking back now, and I don't know, it's I was thinking about and hearing you talking with Joe, Karen, about how all the kids, and I was like, oh my God, we were kids.
Yeah.
We were the kids in the show. And I thought we just all had so much, and there was a word that I came up with earlier, like just thinking about it, that I'm not touching on now, but it was like this potential and all of this anticipation for what was coming in our lives. And I don't know that any of us would necessarily know how they would look today, but as actors, but as the characters, I think it's the same thing, because we were very much in that part of our lives as actors as the characters were. And I think there's all this anticipation and hope and a certain amount of anxiety about what is the moment that we're in and what does it create down the line. And I loved my character because she was incredibly idealistic, and I felt for my character because she, like so many, kind of let go of some of that because of what she felt, I think she owed to her friends, or what she wanted, not just for herself, but also for everyone, and felt like, well, that's how the business works. I guess I have to do it that way. And I think it's hard because it's, we hear that a lot. Well, this is how the business works. You have to do it this way. Right.
Yeah.
And you can do it that way. But at the end of the movie, she's like, I'm going to do it. We can do it this way. We can do it the way we want to do it.
One of the things that was so great when all of you came in, and really for so many people that were auditioning, is people came in and was like, this is me. I had this happen to me. Like, people related so much to, because it was me.
It was both great and terrible.
Tate, will you answer that question as well? Like, what do you think now when you look back on Alex and her journey in the film as well? You go from editor to wearing that sexy red dress to kind of being like this inspiration at the end, go like, we can do this. Yes, let's go do this. When you look back on it, do you also share Kathleen's point of view that's like, wow, I remember feeling that way about the movie business, or I remember that time in my life feeling so optimistic or idealistic rather about what could happen?
Yes to all the things. And also, hello everyone, to see your faces. This is so funny. I have to say, this project is still so near and dear to my heart in a way where, like, I've recently had like a resurgence in my career in other areas as a writer, and I go into these meetings with executives, and sometimes I talk about this movie as if I'm like, I know what you are dealing with because I was in this movie where I played essentially you right now in this room, and it's like I feel this connection to the material so differently now because I'm sitting in like a different seat of the business. But all that to say, this was such a special time and moment in my life. It still is like something I look on with so much reverence, like such a nerd. I just have so much love for these people and this project. And I popped in at the top here and hearing Karen and Steve talk about the efforts they were making. It's like they had us doing murals and things that we would do in theater to kind of create community. And so for me, it was the first time I'd had a film experience that felt very much like my roots of theater and family building. And so to pivot a little on that, a lot of what I have witnessed in the business is like the film school camps. Like, people go to film school and they have their camps of people. And as an actor who kind of came out and was sort of finding their way and didn't have a camp of people, I was always sort of like guest starring in other camps. And then when we had this movie, it was like my fake self, who was in a film school with these people, now had this community, and Karen and Steve continued it like through dinners and birthdays and all the things through the years. And I like kind of started to feel like I was part of some fake film school that I never actually like went to. So I really, really loved that aspect of it. That's more of a personal answer. But as far as like the character and all, I think I remember reading the script and being like, this is the coolest thing I've ever read. It's like Ocean's 11, but like, you know, the stuff I like. I'm interested in. And so I remember just being so excited. It's like when you feel like, you know, those moments where you watch something and you feel seen, or it's like, it's for you. It's speaking to you in this way. The stakes were so high. And they were so high, like us getting these auditions. It was such a big deal. And all of that importance was, and you know, like looking back now, one thing I love about like young adult stories or sort of like firsts in career is like the stakes are so high, and I think we all remember those moments in a different way in our lives. And so for me, a lot of this still feels very like real. Obviously, we look like that is how nice that was, but it's so fun to have had this. And as I mentioned, like now I'm more on the writing side of things, and recently produced 2 movies this last year. And Karen and Steve like were kind of without knowing this, like they set the tone for the kind of set that I would want to have. And it was like, I've had a lot of different kinds of experiences, but I was like, this is what I want for the sets that I'm involved in. And it was so long ago, but it was like, I knew that if we were having that feeling on a day that I was having when I was working with them, I was like, okay, we're doing good. It wasn't every day that we could achieve it, but we tried.
Well, I mean, it's also evidenced by how much we're all still friends, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we still, I mean, I remember during the pandemic, there was one day I got a text from you, and then outside my door was a bag of grapefruits and oranges and lemons and a bunch of recipes for cocktails. It was, I think, Mother's Day. And Tate was like dropping little bags to her lady friends for Mother's Day, living pieces of fruit from her trees in her yard of women that she wanted to uplift. And it was just so special. And then, you know, Kathleen's got two boys now, and one of her boys is almost exactly the same age as Jax, our boy. And so they've had many dates together over the years. So that even solidified our friendship even more, because now our boys are friends. And yeah, I mean, it's just amazing how these things can just keep going.
Yeah.
So I want to ask, Aaron has been so quiet, but I want to ask Kathleen a question first, and then I want to, because Kathleen, it came up multiple times as John and I were talking, is the plot point of you and of your character and Gary Green. I wonder how you feel about that today versus how you looked at it when you did the part.
I will go back to watching it again just a while ago, and got to the point in the movie where she's listening to this voicemail being left and just sitting on the floor of your kitchen and crying because she's just feeling the weight of the conflict of what she did versus how she wanted to live versus this, you know, how people see her, and, you know, apologies being made to her, but feeling the need to apologize, I think. Anyway, and so I'm watching this, and at this point, now the 10-year-old's been watching it off and on the whole time. The 5-year-old's been around, but playing Legos kind of out of eyeshot. There were times when I was like, oh crap, I didn't realize the language was like this here. And I'm like,
I like that you said, oh crap, I didn't realize the language was
and so at one point, the 5-year-old has come over and he's next to me. He looks up the TV, and then he's like, why is she crying? And I'm like, does he know that's me? I don't know if he, and at one point he had said earlier, he's like, Mama, that girl, did you do her voice? Said, yes, Enzo, I did do her voice. And because he wasn't really watching it at that point, but he came over and he saw the part where she's sitting on the floor crying, and he kept, like, after that he went away and he played for a minute. He came back, he goes, why is she crying? Mama, why is she crying? Why was she crying? And I was like, oh, how do I explain this to my 5-year-old? I said, you know, she did something she shouldn't have done, and she feels really bad about it. What did she do? And I was like, oh shit. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, you know, Enzo, she did something she realizes that she doesn't feel good about. And then I was like, and she lied to somebody. because I was like, she lied about who she is, why she's there, all these things. I said she lied because I was like, that's words he'll understand, and that's kind of a more concrete thing than saying she did something she shouldn't have done. I was like, she lied. Anyway, I mean, I think we all do things we regret and we make mistakes. But watching it today, I was like, oh man, you just want to shake somebody, or if you see something about to happen, go, no, don't do it. But it was absolutely necessary for telling the story. It's like I'm watching this series of things happen that characters are doing. They're all kind of like, but that this is part of the movie where they're doing all those things that are gonna, it's all catalyst and growth and change. Did I want it to happen? No. Watching it, I didn't want it to happen.
But in your 20s, you do things. You navigate things. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question.
It was a fantastic answer.
Okay.
So, Aaron, first of all, it's great to see you.
It looks the same, Aaron.
Yeah, Aaron hasn't changed at all.
I just grew the hair back after the pandemic, so it's been short for long hair. Long hair is coming back.
We've all got long hair now.
Yeah, right? So.
Yeah, we all have long hair now. So first of all, for people out there who want to get a job, Aaron, I want to tell you how Aaron got hired on this movie. Is I was interviewing a bunch of DPs, and you look at people's reels and you look at their resumes, and I didn't have a good DP that I really wanted to work with. And I saw Aaron's reel, which was really interesting and somewhat strange. And he came into our meeting, and he had a lookbook for the film, and he'd gone through the entire film scene by scene and said, it had pictures from other movies. This is how I want you. I would approach your film. It was like Stacy Keach showing up with a dog-eared copy of my script, is that it was so clear that, and to be clear, Aaron was right. I mean, like so much of the scenes, I remember you had scenes from Fight Club for the office scenes, because we wanted that desaturated look. And so first of all, that was great. And what I'm curious about, Aaron, was there a specific way you approached this film? I know it was a long time ago, but coming in as the DP and we didn't know each other, was there a specific way you approached this?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think getting back to initially me pitching you, right? Like, and I think that's like something for other cinematographers too, which is like, if you're trying to get a job, like doing the research is huge. And I just remember at the time really reading the script, really loving the script. And I'm like, I want to do this movie, and for me, it's like, how do you know what to do unless you've done the research? And whether that's acting or cinematography or directing, you have to spend the time, right? And so I just remember spending a lot of time, well, what is this scene about? Like, what does it feel like? And then, you can, once you're asking yourself with the question of what it feels like, then you have to translate that into some technical aspect, right? So it's like, what lens choice are we using? Is it the scene feel like, is it moody? Is it dark? Is it cool? Is it hot? Is it contrasty? Is it desaturated? And so, I mean, all of those things, are part of the process. And so, I mean, I don't remember it. I remember doing the lookbook for you, but I don't remember exactly what I put in there, because it was a long time ago.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah. But I've done that for other movies, and consistently, that's usually been how I've gotten my first chance with a new director, So I found that that's actually super helpful in terms of like showing that you're prepared. And sometimes you misfire. Like sometimes you say, oh, I see this, and they say something totally else, and then maybe they don't choose you, but maybe that's okay, because you might not have been seeing the same thing anyway,
I'll explain a little how Aaron and I work together. So I had written the script, and then I storyboarded the whole movie by myself, not because I was going to use those storyboards, but because it helped me transition from like a writer's brain to a director's brain. Like I had to stop being the writer. And then when Aaron and I started to meet, we literally, I don't even know if you even looked at those storyboards I did. No. It didn't really matter.
They're still all here. I still have them all in here.
I'm so glad Aaron is being...
is that from the movie? Oh.
Yeah, I still have like some of the old like the top pictures and stuff like that.
So before we shot, Aaron and I in pre-production for weeks, I think, walked through every single scene. And we walked through the blocking on what we thought it was going to be. Not that we knew, because we didn't have locations, and we walked through kind of how we wanted to do it. And I am not a cinematographer. I'm not a good, it's my weakest skill.
Oh,
I think like an editor. So I knew storytelling wise what I wanted, that I needed to see this reaction, or I needed to, you know, but I didn't. So I would say, well, like, what if we put the camera here to look at this? And everyone would go, what if it's here? You know? And I would go, oh, well, that looks good. And that was the process throughout. And it literally, every location we got to, Aaron and I are walking through, being every actor, being the camera, until because when you don't have any money, or not a lot of money, and you're under real time constraints, you can't be figuring stuff out on the day. Particularly for Aaron and I, we had to be on the same page of what we were trying to accomplish for every day, or we wouldn't have made our days.
And the pre-production was kind of grueling, honestly. Like, I can't remember. I spent weeks, I feel like, in your little tiny office, you know, like going through each page. Yeah, exactly. Weeks, you know, and you know, you sit down and you just hash it out, and you're like, okay, well, what is it? You know, like, what does it look like? Where does the camera go? How many angles do we need? And it's kind of, it can be exhausting, but also, you know, it's like building muscles, right? Those are the muscles you need to actually do the heavy lifting when you're on set. And, you know, without it, you're going to be weak. And that's what you don't want, you know? So like, hopefully we've already had our conversations about style, and maybe even disagreements sometimes about what we think the scene should be before we get there. And then it's going to change again, right? It changes, you know, like when we get to location, and then once we see the acting, it changes again. And then, you know, depending on my resources and time, I might be like, hey, maybe I could get a dolly shot over here, or maybe I can sneak a slider movement. And then I'm pitching, right? And then I'm hoping I can sell Steve on something he likes, and it's still in tune with the movie, you know.
Well, this is always one of the things about being a director is everybody wants more. And Aaron wanted a steady cam, and Aaron, you know, and like in the production design, there's some real crackling from someone. I don't know where it's coming in. Are you guys hearing that too?
Yeah.
I don't know if someone wants to try to mute your.
Might have been Tate.
Maybe it was Tate. So there's always, you know, production design. They want more money for the set, and you know, someone wants more time or more, and so it's a constant. The only person who really knew everything. Well, I won't say I knew everything. I'm in the middle of all of it. So it's like, okay, if I give Aaron that, then I have to take this away from over here. Or someone might know that one of the actors is having a bad day. I know that, but the AD doesn't know that. And so then, you know, it's trying to negotiate all of that stuff. And Aaron was always pushing for his department, which is what his job is, to make the movie look better, you know?
Right. Because the hard part is you never want to look back and say that, I mean, you can't be inflexible, but you want to look back, and you don't want to say you just finished the day. You want to see you got visually the movie. You want to be telling the story appropriately. And sometimes that can be challenging. Like sometimes, you know, you sort of give up some things and you were like, okay, I'm trying to help. And then later on you're like, ooh, maybe that wasn't the best call. And then other times you fight really hard for something, and then you're like, that was a great call. Like, for instance, we had the rooftop scene, Steve, if you remember. Right. And this was
we remember the rooftop scene well.
Yeah.
And is that near the beginning of the film, that one where they're having the conversation, everything? Okay.
The party,
the tequila moment.
And we really wanted to see the skyline behind them, you know. But we're on, I think it's the second floor. It was like a parking lot or something. And I'm like, Steve, there's like nowhere for me to put a light. Like, I'm on a rooftop. Like, what am I gonna do? You know, I'm like, I need a balloon light. I need a balloon. I need a balloon.
I need it.
I need it. And those things are not cheap. You know, those are expensive. But ultimately, it's like, you know, look, we got to be able to see everybody. We need flattering light. You want to be able to see the skyline. I can't be seeing cables and C-stands and all sorts of stuff. We want to be able to move around and be able to kind of like tell the story fast. We only have a certain amount of time. I can't put condors up there, you know. We don't have the budget for that, and that was one of those things that, you know, we had to talk about, because it's not cheap, right?
And you were right, you know, and that scene looks great. I think that's probably the prettiest scene in the film. It was also one of the things that we were determined at the time was that it was an East Side of LA movie. And this was before, like, just at the very, very beginning of downtown kind of becoming an interesting place. But because we live on the East Side, I really wanted to show this realm of Los Angeles that really wasn't seen. And that rooftop, because one of the things that happened is we had a location scout who was insane, and so we fired her almost immediately. And so really I was the main location scout too.
Yeah. Steve was out scouting locations a lot.
Oh.
And I found this parking lot on top of a 3-story law office. And I was like, oh my God, like the rooftop of this parking lot is the most amazing view of downtown. And we went to this person and they had never had a movie work there. And that's really good because people in LA will charge you a lot for a location because they know they can get a lot. If you're in the middle of Minnesota, they'll go like, oh, you want to make a movie at my restaurant? That's fantastic. Come on and do it.
Here, let me pay you to do a movie.
Yeah. I'll make your crew food. And LA's not like that. And I think she had charged us a pretty reasonable rate. And then it was right when I think it's Mission Impossible 3 was shooting in downtown LA, and they took over all of 2nd Street, like 2 miles of Los Angeles, and they paid her, and just to have a chase scene go by. They weren't using her building at all, and they paid her like $5,000 or something. And then she came back to us right the day before we had to shoot and said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to give me 3 times as much money.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, because now she found out she could make a lot of money from this.
Wow.
And then and this was, that's dealing with making a movie. And we had to negotiate with her and come up with a new price because that's what it was,
You're like, we're not Mission Impossible.
Yeah, we're not. You don't understand.
We just sweat. Get money.
You mentioned you've produced from what I'm looking at IMDb, if I'm correct here, Sex Appeal, Love and Baseball, these 2 films coming up that you've produced. You're also like a seasoned improviser. You've been in a million commercials. You've done so much. Is there a move for you as you're maybe looking at this, how Steve has directed this, also throws himself into that scene with you, watching the editing going on there with that scene? Is there an idea of yours to maybe at some point move into directing yourself maybe, or is producing and writing the limit?
No, the goal is directing. But I have found that, and I'm sure Steve can speak to this. It's like, sometimes you just got to create something to be able to put yourself in that position. And because I'm not, somebody who came from a film school or, have, necessarily the avenues. Well, sometimes when you're an actor first, people are like, oh, aren't you cute? You have a script. That's so cute. Oh, you want to direct now? That's so cute. And so I feel like I get a lot of that. It's also my personality that brings it on. But I do have like a very creative brain and, deep desires to direct. And so the Love and Baseball was more of an exercise in producing so that I could be like, okay, do I have this, can I manage these positions? And I also really like, because I come from theater roots, I like to know what everybody does and how they do it so that I can have empathy for their job and also maybe help them help me kind of thing. And so that was the sort of the goal with the producing. And then Sex Appeal, I did write it to direct, but it can be kind of hard to get greenlit, sometimes. So luckily that movie was greenlit, but I was not. Also, sidebar, another time, another podcast, but my reps, this is like the worst story ever. But also like everything happens for a reason. So you're like, okay, maybe that's why that happened. But my reps did not tell me that I had a pitch to direct. They just said I had a pitch to the studio, and part of me is like, well, they already like the script. Why would I need to pitch it to him? And I kept asking, are we sure this isn't a director's pitch? It's just a concept pitch? Like, do we know what a concept pitch entails? Because I have a director's pitch. No, that's going to be in a couple weeks. So I show up to a meeting on Zoom. This is early pandemic. There's, 9 executives from Hulu. And they're all waiting to hear a director's pitch. And I didn't have one. And it was somewhere in my desktop, but it was like my first Zoom ever because it was so early pandemic. It's like, I don't even know how to upload that and haven't rehearsed or anything. So pivoted very quickly, pulled the improviser string and talked a lot, immediately got off and was like, called my team and was like, that was a director's pitch. They were waiting for a director's pitch. And they were like, no, that's down the line. I'm like, you guys, that was the shot. And of course you don't
but did your reps go in and fess up to them that they screwed that up? Was there any?
I definitely requested that because, as many of you know, it's like you get one shot in Hollywood. Yeah. So it's like you don't get a chance to sort of, if that's the impression, it's underwhelming. People it's hard to get 9 people on a call. They're not going to like do it again.
We're up to
Yeah,
6.
I mean, that's them
We're up to 6
fighting
here,
words.
so
If they didn't fess up for that, that's the kind of thing where you're like, I don't
so
know.
Cassie Levine was your agent, is what you're saying. Cassie Levine.
So I just want to
with my reps.
I just want to jump in. I have such a strong memory of Tate's audition, and I was just really reminded of it because you're looking for where magic happens. And Tate comes in, she does the scene, does a great job of the scene, and then Tate, you started talking, and just it was a long stream of consciousness, and it was so
just
so
Tate being
funny.
Tate.
And you're talking about how you love the character, and then you walked out, and we just turned to each other and it's like, well, she's cast. You know, like it was so obvious that you were the right person. And that's the weird thing about casting is that it's not, people think it's about we're looking for the best actors. And it's like all the actors Karen and Jamie brought in were great. It's looking for the right person, you know.
The alchemy between character and role is precious and elusive, and if you see it, you grab it and you hold on to it as tightly as you can, but you don't, not too tightly, you don't want to squash it. But
well, and to echo that, you guys had brought, I believe it was myself and Chris in, and then we got to watch you pick everyone else, like to be a part of.
That's right. You were the first 2 cast.
Yeah, you were the first 2 cast.
It was so cool to witness that. To what you're speaking at right now, Karen, a lot of times as a young actor, you're kind of like, I should have run my lines 5 more times and I had it. And if I'd have looked at, I should have looked to the left, you know, and it's like those kinds of things you get on yourself for. But really, when you step back, it's so much about just like this innate quality that someone has, or this essence that plays off of this other essence, and this contrast between the essences that fill all of the different colors that we need in the thing. And it was really cool to watch everybody kind of.
I can tell every actor I know till I'm blue in the face that you can be the most fantastic actor, you can have the most perfect look, but that's not necessarily what it is. It's about all of these things coming together. It could be that the lead is the same color hair that you have, and boom, you're out. It could be that, you know, they don't like your name. I mean, like
this is why I got out. This is why I got out. Yeah, I can control this world so much easier than I can control acting or any of that stuff. Yeah,
it's so hard as an advocate for actors to see, especially my friends, and watch them go, "Oh, I screwed that up," and it's like, no, you really didn't. You did great. You did a fantastic job. It was nothing to do with you. Right. You did the work. You came in prepared. If you do all that stuff, that's all you can do. The rest of it is out of your control. Well, and the sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be. So.
It's tough to accept. Yeah.
When John and I did The Godfather, and there's just the amount that Coppola had to fight for Al Pacino, and it's not like, and he auditioned every great actor in Hollywood,
and
it's not like he, it's not like that he thought that De Niro wasn't a good actor. You know, it's that he thought Al Pacino was the right person to play that part. And I will tell a story. I probably shouldn't say this publicly, considering the other podcast that I do. But one of the people submitted for Joe's part for Gary Green, because we put out the breakdown and then we get people submitted. And one of them was William Shatner.
What?
And
I was like, Steve,
alternate universe.
And Shatner. I said, and I love Shatner. I mean, I'm literally doing a Star Trek podcast. Captain Kirk is a hero. It was not even a moment that I considered it. And Karen and Jamie were like, no, that's not the right person for the part. And I love.
We showed him. Great. We're like, look, Shatner, and we're like, no,
no, it wasn't right. And it's not that I don't think Shatner's great. I do, but Joe Mantegna was right, and Shatner wasn't. You know.
Shatner could have been Stacy Keach character, possibly. I think that could have fit a little bit better, possibly. Kathleen, you do a lot of audiobooks now. Have you kind of walked away from the on-camera stuff? Do you feel more satisfaction doing the audiobooks? And are your kids starting to clamor, possibly, as they enter that age to get up in front of camera?
I think one of them has absolutely no interest.
Oh, that's good.
The second one, I think, God help us. I think in the womb, he was. My wife was like, God, he's so dramatic. This is when I was pregnant with him. And I said, actually, he's going to be an actor. I was like, don't say that. But he's very dramatic. He loves characters. He does voices already. He's, you know, he's kind of a little one-man show, but he doesn't know what it is. Like, thankfully, he actually has no idea that that's a thing, really. You know, he knows that I do auditions. Like, I audition for a lot of animation now, which is super fun. So he knows that I go into a closet and I close the door and then I
talk into a microphone.
Yeah, that's kind of all he knows. And apparently he knows that I do voices for characters on screen. At least that's what he thinks.
That makes sense.
He doesn't, I still don't think he knows that was me. But no, I still audition here and there for on-camera stuff. It just, you know, nice work if you can get it.
Right, absolutely. Aaron, you've gone on to do a bunch of reality shows as director of photography. At this stage in your career, in 2009, who are you as a cinematographer when you're making the assistants? Where are you in your experience? Where are you in your process? Where are you? What are you working out? What are you focusing on at that time that you were trying to hone through the assistants, if there was any?
Well, I think to Steve's credit, I think this, you know, Steve's film was the first film that was really like a larger opportunity, like a larger budget movie, you know? And so, you know, the other films I'd made were for considerably less money. And we're doing well with the budget we had, right? But this was a chance to actually kind of like level up. I mean, like, you know, getting a chance to work with Jane Seymour and Stacy Keach and Joe Montana. Oh, you know, like these are like, you know, movie stars you've seen in the movies, right? Like, so it's like, oh, okay, it's my first real film with like really talented actors, you know, and so, you know, I think a lot of it was just trying to put the work in, right? And then, you know, and you just kind of like do the best you can with the resources you have, and then you hope that kind of goes out into the world and it finds an audience, you know? Even looking back at it now with quite a few years of experience down the line, I'm pretty happy with it overall. Like I was like, you know what? Like I like the lighting. I like it. You know, I like the camera movement. You know, perhaps we had a discussion about camera choices back in the day. You know, we were trying to decide between the Red camera, which was first coming out.
It was brand new. Yeah.
Yeah. It just came out. It was brand new. And the Panasonic HDX 900, which we used. And I'm like, maybe the depth of field of a super 35 millimeter camera system might have like made it feel a little bit more filmic, you know, even with the same lighting and everything else. But there were a lot of problems with the camera back then, with it overheating and then data rates and everything else. So, you know, I think on my end, I'm just very grateful for the opportunity, and I really love the collaboration of everyone. You know, you know, everyone who's here right now. I'm very proud of the film. In terms of like how it kind of comes together, you know, I think it's cohesive as a whole. You know,
I agree. I told Steve earlier, and I don't know if you were listening to the show earlier, but I mentioned how my favorite scenes in the film, in terms of the lighting, are all the scenes with Jane Seymour. The way you guys captured that yellowishy golden glow around her throughout the. I really I looked forward to every one of those scenes. There was just such enjoyment in the lighting of it all that I was like, wow, they really got those scenes down pat, because it's so uniquely different from the rest of the movie in terms of the lighting. It stands out.
I mean, you know, like I think she naturally brings magic wherever she goes. So
she also naturally glows. If you look,
she has she glows.
She is luminous.
She's a luminous source already.
That jewelry, it's incredible.
No, but I mean, there are specific things. I mean, when you're doing beauty lighting, right? You know, you're using very large sources. So we were using much larger sources there. So you get really glorious soft light, a lot more fill, much warmer color tones. We might have used a little bit of like, you know, maybe quarter straw or something like that to just kind of, you know, bring that in there. That is how kind of it looks naturally. It wasn't timed that way.
Right.
You know, and like anything, you know, they talk about, well, what's excellent cinematography? Well, half of it is like having fantastic production design, right? Like that house is gorgeous, you know, and I think the biggest challenge Steve and I had was like, we have this fantastic house. We have these very talented people. We have an extremely limited period of time. So like, how do we really like get the most out of it? You know, we want her to look good. We want to see that she's in this really luxurious house. How do we show that off? You know? But I mean, really, for those things, especially with her, a lot of it's, you know, just large sources, large frames to really just soften the light. And we actually had a lot of extensive filtration too. We did a lot of, you know, extensive filtration tests for the movie. And even like, I don't know in this particular scene, but I was even changing the detail, like
Right.
softness electronically in the camera from shot to shot, which the AC thought I was an insane person. So
which you are. We
Yeah.
also had, and I think Aaron, it was your recommendation. We had a fantastic colorist whose name is Phil Azenzer, and
Yeah.
Phil was coloring Lost at the time he was doing the assistants.
Wow.
And he kept leaving Lost with his assistant to come over and do our movie because he was having more fun, and he was awesome. And I remember when we got to the Jane Seymour scenes, he's like, "Oh, I bet you want like a classic warm Hollywood look," and color correction is, you know, just an amazing other level.
Sure.
I have one really quick Jane Seymour story that just popped into my brain. You know, I said that I had these meetings with these actors beforehand, and I went up to Jane's house in Malibu, and it was right after, this was, I don't remember what year it is, but Wedding Crashers was like a year or two before. And Jane's hilarious in Wedding Crashers.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sitting on a couch with her, and you know, she's beautiful and charismatic and has a lot of power, let's say, as a human. and I mentioned like, "Oh, I like Wedding Crashers," and I swear to God, she leaned in and she went, "You like that? Oh, I bet you like that." And I went, "Whoa!" It was like, I don't know
what she was doing.
Yeah. Jane is not a person you would want to mess with.
No,
yeah.
Medicine Woman is just a character. She is a force of nature. I've met her a couple of times. She is. We should wrap up here. We're at the 2-hour mark. Steve, any final questions for our incredible guests about the film, or should we wrap up here?
No, mostly I just want to thank you guys. You know, like, this was such an important, informative moment and such a special time. Like, financially, did this movie go where I wanted? Career-wise, did it go where it wanted? No, it didn't. In terms of an experience, an artistic experience, I couldn't have wished for anything better. It was so, we were surrounded by such great people. The energy on the set was so great. It was unbelievably challenging. I mean, like, I've never worked at that hard in my life, but boy, it was worth it. So thank you.
Definitely. Thank you guys.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Tate. And thank you, Karen. I'm going to let you all go now. Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate that. You guys want to promote anything or say anything, or are you all good?
Oh, yeah.
To go?
Tate, plug your movie.
I like everyone go watch The Assistant. Steve, where is it now?
It's right here on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
It's for free on the Cine-Files YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I got it. You could pay for it on iTunes, but I don't make any money. Karen and we get nothing.
Okay.
So might as well watch it on YouTube for free.
Tate, you had something at a festival yesterday, right?
Yeah, we just had our world premiere of Love and Baseball. It was pretty fun. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
hopefully we've already got interest for distribution. We'll see how it goes. But that was a really killer festival for anybody out there looking for one to submit to. Definitely highly recommend Dances with Phones.
Awesome. Okay. And on my end, even though I've done like a lot of reality television, there's something I shot with Marie Kondo that's coming out on Netflix.
Nice.
So that'll be coming out. So that's a high-end reality thing, you know. So doing that stuff, but I still love features, guys. So I'll shoot the hell out of it, you know. Like
he's not lying. He'll shoot the hell out of it.
Do you go to your equipment and go, "Thank you"? Oh, I don't know
Yeah.
what I feel about it. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, let's let everybody go. Thank you all so much for joining us. Steve and I will wrap up. Much love to you all, and it was great seeing you again for sure, Kathleen and Karen. Bye.
You too.
Bye.
All right, there's everybody here. Steve, fun conversation. Certainly was great for. Let me switch us around. It was great for to see Joe Mantegna. Great to see all the wonderful people who came on. Tay, Kathleen, Aaron, Karen as well, and answering some of the questions from the patrons and answering some of the questions in the chat as well. Any final words as we wrap up this discussion of The Assistants and a little bit of Great White Shark Beyond the Cage of Fear?
So first, I'm going to go back to where I started. Thank you, John, for being willing to do this. I really appreciate it. It felt, you know, people have been asking about these films since we've been doing the Cine-Files and answered some questions, and it felt really good to just kind of put a capper on it in a way and to return back to this time in my life, even though there's some pain involved with this story as well. None of that has to do with the movie. It's something I'm still, as much as I have criticisms of it as you do, I don't think it's a perfect film. I'm really, really proud of it, you know? And so being able to revisit it with you and being able to revisit it with some of the people that are fans of the Cine-Files, it's been really, really great. I really, really appreciate it.
I hope you felt we did it justice over these 2 hours. I feel like we had some really great conversations about all of it and about your process as well. So it was a joy to do that with you, brother.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks to Joe Mantegna. Thanks to Kathleen Early. Thanks to Tay. Thanks to Aaron Torres. Thanks to Karen P. Morris for joining us for this conversation. And thanks to all of you who sent in. We did have one. Sorry, Steve. We had one super chat that came through from Matthew Gremlick, who's been dominating the chat. Really enjoyed this conversation. No question. Merely grateful for this unusual episode. So thank you, Matthew. Appreciate you saying that. And Doug Developer said, hi, Steve. As a director, if you had the opportunity to work with a Meryl Streep or Daniel Day-Lewis and they wanted to overrule a few of your directing decisions, how easily would you let them, since they are the greatest actors working today? Real quick, what do you say to that?
It's really situational. The answer is I believe in the win-win. I believe in the non-zero sum game, which is that if they have a problem with what I want to do and I don't like what they want to do, then my goal is to find something we all want to do. To find that means to me, that means there's something better.
Okay.
My choice wasn't quite right. But and this is the thing, is like some people see some directors, literally when I was in USC in film school, they would talk about, you know, actors as props, essentially. Right. And there's an extremely disrespectful way of dealing with actors. I don't believe that. I believe in actors as collaborators and actors as the most exciting and talented creators that you're working with. And they're the one who has to be in front of the camera. So regardless of who they are, Meryl Streep on down, I want to build that relationship. But I'll tell you one thing, if Daniel Day-Lewis or Meryl Streep have an opinion, man, I take that opinion really, really seriously, because they are literally among the best actors in the history of film.
I think that's well said. All right, let's wrap up, Steve. What's the social media stuff for the Cine-Files here? What do we usually say at the end here?
There's all sorts of stuff. Follow us on Facebook, Cine_Files on Twitter, the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. Subscribe to, some of you want to subscribe to us right here on YouTube. Make sure to like this video. You can leave your comments here. It's a great place to interact with all of you. You can subscribe to the show in the other places, Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Stitcher. Please leave your reviews on Apple Podcasts. They're just so important to the show. You can support the show on patreon.com/the Cine-Files, where you get some advanced knowledge of some of the movies that we're doing. You can ask questions, as people did today for our live stream. And if you want to buy the assistance, you don't have to. It's free on YouTube. Enjoy. And I just looked, and I'm really bummed out about it. Beyond the Cage of Fear is still on Amazon Prime, but it is no longer free.
Oh,
so that's a bummer. So it's, you know, $3 to rent or whatever it is. So sorry about that, but it's a good shark documentary. It is very much not like Shark Week. And so if you're into that kind of thing, go check that out too.
Absolutely. There you go. And you can follow Steve at SR Morris on Twitter. Follow him at SR Morris 1 on Instagram. You can follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram. And if you want to head over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says, of course, my other podcast, The Top 10 and The Geek Buddy. I know, baby. I know. We're almost done.
It's a cute dog, by the way.
She is. She's a sweetheart. I love her to death, but she's real mad she's stuck in this room for right now. All right. Thank you all so much. We'll talk to you next time, next month, with another brand new episode of the Cine-Files Live. Be well until then. Peace.